Hello, and welcome to Making a Life, the conversation number 5, which is also known as a holiday gathering. You may have been here for our first conversation, which happened in June. And the very first conversation of this series was actually with Kaffe and Erin. It was to celebrate Color Duets, the book that they created as a catalog to go with an exhibition that is going to be happening at the Monterey Museum of Art in May. That conversation became really actually turned into a masterclass in creativity. And right away, when we finished, we thought, oh my gosh, we should be doing this again. This was so valuable to so many people. We weren't sure at that time how or when, but then as the holidays started to approach and our calendars aligned, we decided that this would be a really good time. This is a year when we have all faced all sorts of new challenges and fears. The pandemic has demanded that we change our expectations of what our daily lives and our special occasions will look like. So we are here today to celebrate creativity, which is in fact one of our most powerful tools. It is an innate tool with which we are all born. I liken it to a pilot light. My hope is that this event, this exploration of creativity, will help all of us to feel connected, inspired, and resilient as we begin this holiday season, during which we are being called upon to change our perspectives on what is normal and what is possible. Erin is going to lead us in a card making activity, and then we'll continue the conversation with Kaffe. But first, I'd like to introduce Caitlin Reclusado, the book buyer at the Phoenix Shop, our partner for this event. The Phoenix Shop is part of Nepenthe, the destination in Big Sur where Kaffe and Erin both grew up 25 years apart and where Erin still lives. Caitlin?
Thank you, Melanie. Hi, everybody. I just want to say it's so amazing to see so many of you here gathering in this celebration, exploration of creativity. And as Melanie mentioned, I am the book buyer at the Phoenix Shop. And I just want to start off by saying thank you. You know, as an independent bookseller, any of you that might be choosing to use us to add one of these incredible books to your collection or to offer them up as a very lovely gift to the people you care about, just want to say thank you for supporting an independent family-owned business like ours. We've been a business for over 55 years, and we have a really long history of being a place of creativity and culture and community. And our founder, Lolly, was an incredibly generous woman. She really treated her staff and her guests like family. And for so many of us, that is a tradition that is very much alive and well today. And Big Sur is also home to many traditions. And as Melanie mentioned, there is a beautiful one of handmade cards, which Erin is here to tell us about. So Erin, can you get us started?
Yes. Oh, it's so exciting. I think this is such a miracle. I can't get over that we're all able to do this together and see into each other's worlds like this. It's wonderful. I grew up in Big Sur I was born in 1963, and I remember the handmadeness of life. It's still very much that way, but there was such a focus on everything coming out of your creative impulse. There was so much that we would gather from things that were thrown away and make them into things that were really beautiful. And there was a tradition in our family and in the community of hand making cards, Christmas cards. There was a local artist named Emil Norman, whose partner Brooke Clemens would start making their Christmas cards in July to be able to have enough ready to go by December. And in our family, that was something that Kaffe was sort of the one who, while his sisters and brothers were told to go off and chop wood and build the kerosene lamps and dig ditches, Kaffe was assigned the task of painting the family Christmas cards. And in our own family, that tradition has continued annually. And throughout the community, the work I do in the community has a lot to do with keeping those kinds of handmade traditions alive. So it's a beautiful tradition to come from, but it's also something wonderful that you might start in your own life, in your own family. Just if it's not something you had in your history, looking around and finding what's available. And what gets me really excited is color. So Today I'm going to show you how to make a card simply with gathered materials, and what I have assembled today are colored papers, some glue stick, and a card base that I'll be working on, which is actually a recycled card. So that's gonna be how I'm gonna take it away. And I think Melanie, you want me to just start making a card?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Okay, great. So we have my hand spotlight here, and I am an intuitive colorist. I really thought about how I wanted to start this, and I've been having dreams about this color. This is the color that I got so excited about painting out for making a card with. And it may not be a traditional Christmas color, but it's the color that ignites in me this excitement. So I go with that. It's going with the energy. And I'm just going to take my recycled card. On the back of it is another card that I cut poorly. So I'm going to take the blank face and just lay on top of it this color. And I know I want this really rich fuchsia to be where I start. So I'm just going to lay it down on top of the card and figure out the dimensions just by folding. I don't really like to use things like rulers, and I don't really even like to use things like scissors. I just find myself getting more excited by the possibilities of tearing and the randomness and accidentalness that happens when you tear. I just find that to be stimulating. You end up with sort of a soft handmade edge. And within a minute, I can just transform the background color. I'm a painter, so I'm always working with color, usually on a canvas, but working with white is one of those things that is always so terrifying. It's like if I can just quickly get rid of the white of this card and turn it into something that, wow, it has so much impact with that color. And then take a little bit of glue. I'm using acrylic medium here. I'll stick this where you can see it. A little acrylic medium, like hodgepodge. And I'm just gonna put it down, and it's gonna hold it there just enough. I don't have to do too much more than that just to get started. I may change things around, so I may not want it to be too gluey at first. And then I'm going to look at all these colors, and I have been painting up papers for classes that I teach online. And I have this array of color to play with. And I just like to start by taking one color and putting it next to another color, and then another. And I'm kind of gathering a little rainbow here to see what might ignite a spark, what might get me really excited. And that's the first thing. That's the place from which I'm going to start. And I'm just feeling warmth. I'm feeling I want something to be vibrant. I want something that's going to radiate, and figuring out the orientation of the card. And I don't actually figure out too much. I kind of just start playing. So this color is really on my mind. It's in my heart, I should say. It's just this color that keeps showing up in my paintings, this really warm and radiant color. And again, I'm just using the cards and tearing to start creating another band of color. And as you're making a card along with me, what I would really just encourage you to do is just feel your way as you go. Feel your way in what colors are giving you a charge, and play. And if something is not pleasing you, put another color on top of it. So these two now are beginning to feel kind of like this exciting little world that I want to play with. And this other thing you can do with colored paper is tearing. So I'm tearing a piece and just getting this really soft, rugged edge. And maybe that becomes the shape of a mountain underneath a bright sky. In fact, this morning, this was the color of dawn as it came up over the mountains. So I'm going to go with that. I remember looking at that this morning thinking, wow, I wish I had my camera. I wish I was out there painting it. But instead, it just showed up while I was tearing paper, because that's how it works, you guys. You notice things and you pay attention, and they start popping up and becoming part of your internal well of ideas. So I am going to continue just following that intuitive feeling, really with the color being the forward emotion and the forward feeling, and gluing it down as I go. And you have an option when you're working this way to glue as you go, or to just position things. And then after you've gotten everything organized and arranged, then gluing down and making those definitive decisions. So it's up to you how you want to move forward with that. I think that there's something very, very good about having a decision you have to work with. So I'm going to go with the decision first, which means gluing down first. And I also am bringing in scissors, because even though my rule of thumb is not to use them, all rules are meant to be broken. And I'm going to just give myself a sharp edge and create something which will resemble a star in the sky. Who says stars can't be pink? So message of this is really go with your intuition, start with color, have fun, make decisions as you go, or wait and make them at the end. This isn't filming very vibrantly, but it's vibrant enough close up. So I've got this big star over the mountain, and that's going to be basically the beginning of my motif. I've got a mountain of pink. I've got some beautiful color working together, and I've got everything I need around me. And I'm going to continue playing with looking at which colors want to resonate with other colors and carry on. So I hope you've all begun making your card with me, but if not, this is the time to start and take the ball and roll with it.
Great. Thanks so much, Erin. Kaffe, I wanted to switch over to you, and I want to talk to you first a little bit about your upbringing in Big Sur, and when you moved there, which I think was in 1947 when you were a young child. It was way off the beaten path, and if you wanted to have fun, you had to make fun. If you wanted to have art, you had to make art. And I feel like that became a muscle that was you worked on so naturally that it became your superpower in life. So I'd like you to just talk a little bit to us, tell us a little bit about that, and tell us if you have some memories of making those holiday cards for your family.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it was always lovely to sit down and have to paint out all the cards. And of course, I put far too much detail and interest in everyone. And so I was at this table painting away for days and days and days. It was lovely. But otherwise, we used to entertain ourselves. I used to dress my sisters up, and we would pretend that we were great royalty, and we would roll around the parking lot I would put them in a wheelbarrow and push them around like it was a golden carriage, and with wonderful costumes and things like that. So it was fun the way we made our own entertainment. We all had very big imaginations, and we were all big characters.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever screamed the loudest got the attention.
Right. And so I actually, as some people here may know, I was the editor of your autobiography, and I was looking at that last night, and I found this quote, something that you wrote. It said, "One thing I did learn during those solitary days of wandering the countryside was to look at things more intensely if I got bored or sad. There was always something to light me up. Even the grayest of rocks revealed delightful hidden shades when studied closely." Mm. And it just really struck me that kind of says it all. about the way that you exist in the world, that alertness, that tool that you learned as a child growing up in a place where, you know, there weren't that many people, and sometimes you were wandering in a solitary way. And it seems like, you know, when the pandemic started, I know you had to cancel quite a lot of travel because you spend a huge amount of the time on the road teaching. So I'm just wondering what that was like for you to kind of accept that you weren't going to travel, and how you found your way.
Well, it was fantastic. I mean, because in a way, our life didn't change that much. You know, I'm kind of a hermit these days, and I love creating. And I sit and knit great swatches of knitting and for different design briefs. And also, I paint a lot, and I do a lot of needlepoint. Mm-hmm. And one of the needlepoints that we're enjoying doing now is taking my own kit. That I have a great friend in California who loves to buy kits, but she's not so keen on actually stitching them. And I love it because I love stitching them. I love stitching one of my own designs, even, you know, because it's like painting by colors. And you know, you're just by numbers. You just got all the colors are printed on the canvas, and you just fill them in. And you watch this design come to life, you know, from a painting into a stitched three-dimensional object. But another thing that I love doing is knitting, complicated knitting. And so this is a very, you know, typical pattern for me to work with about 18 colors in a row. You have to get used to this on the back, which a lot of people just couldn't even contemplate that. They're off the minute you show them that. But, you know, you get used to it. I work with manageable lengths of color. And so if it gets too tangled, which it always does, I can just cut it off and grab some other clean yarn and start again, you know. So it's no big thing, but it is so much fun to build a pattern, particularly a geometric pattern that kind of repeats like this. Mm-hmm. And so that is the way I do like a design for Peruvian connection. There's a finished piece in wonderful Peruvian cotton, and you can see how you know, that they could take that and just make that into a garment. It's got a nice top border and a bottom border. Mm-hmm.
And so yeah. So being at home and having to cancel all that travel wasn't too hard for you because you were able to sort of just turn to your studio and get busy.
Exactly. And what Brandon said to me one day, my wonderful partner in crime, Brandon, said to me one day, you know, the storeroom is a mess. It's just full of buckets full of swatches of yarn and of knitting, and you've got to sort it out and throw away what you don't want. And I went in and I started opening these boxes, and I saw the whole history of my knitting career. You know, all the patterns I've done for Peruvian Connection, for Rowan yarns, for other people, you know, commissions, experiments. When I first started knitting, and I was knitting these huge coats and shawls and things, and all these different colorways, and all of it was there. And so I took these pieces and I started sewing them together into collages, because I thought if they're put together in a kind of tapestry, then we've got something that could be shown in a gallery. Like this is one of them that I'm just working on at the moment. It's kind of in progress. And so I don't know if you can sort of see all the different patterns.
Wow, yes.
But that's just a very, very bright one. But this is another one that is kind of softer grays. I've got all the different moods going on. So we've got some big flowers and different motifs.
And how many years do you think that these swatches span? How old do you think the oldest ones are?
25, 30 years, you know, maybe even longer.
Yeah.
Because it's the experimenting time. I mean, for instance, here you can see there's tumbling blocks in 2 different scales there,
Mhm.
and lots of other designs. And this is a very sort of husky kind of cinnamon palette.
Wow.
Fun to find all the ones that really went together color-wise.
Mhm. So how do you feel when you're doing this? And are you sewing them together yourself, or
Yeah.
people?
They're very, very, very crudely, roughly sewn together.
Mhm.
I am a perfectionist, not. So, I sit there and I just sew them together just so they hang together. And eventually I want to show them in galleries, and I'll stretch them onto frames so
Mhm.
that they are nice and crisp and people can see all the details. Because I think that pattern is just a very, very fascinating subject.
Mhm.
I go around the world looking at all different cultures, and I'm absolutely blown away by how different societies like the Scandinavians or the Japanese or the Africans have their whole language of pattern. And
Mhm.
those cultures are fascinated with pattern. And so I come back home and I'm playing, with stripes, with squares, with geometry, with flowers, with all of these different things. And I collect fantastic books full of things. So I actually going through my library and looking at things like carpet books and mosaics. The decorative arts of the world feed my imagination in a tremendous way.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that, people have been making patterns, as far back as history can record them,
Yeah.
that it is this instinct, and that in this, modern time, we're faced with this challenge of, our lives changing so greatly, and yet you're able to find nourishment and excitement in the same types of things that have been nourishing people since, the beginning of human history, as far
Very
as
good.
we know.
Melanie, I've just been hearing on the wonderful BBC radio a discussion about the Neanderthals, and they're discovering now that the Neanderthals were actually quite fascinated with art and with pattern and with creating, and they're finding examples that they were far more advanced than people think.
Right.
A sort of bad rap, but that so those early human beings recognized that there was something interesting in pattern.
Yeah.
And of course, nature is so full of patterns. The pattern of leaves, the veins in leaves, the petals of flowers that would have a blush of.
Kaffe is, I think he's disconnected a little bit. So I'm going to I'm sure they'll come back in, and I'm going to switch over to Erin. And Erin, I wanted you to start by talking a little bit about your upbringing in Big Sur, and how you sort of experienced that environment, and how you sort of created your fun and your art. And then if you could tell us a little, just because it's fitting for the holiday occasion, the story about the ornaments on the Nepenthe holiday tree. And then from there, I'd just love to find out a little bit more about what you've been experiencing during the pandemic, and how you have sort of found solace in your creativity and your hands.
Well, yeah, I mean, childhood in Big Sur was so interesting because it was like everything. It's like this kind of it giveth and it taketh, right? You've got isolation, you've got road closures, you've got forest fires, you've got loneliness. You're living somewhere very far away from any big city. It's an hour drive to get a bottle of milk. And it was lonely, and it was very and it was just like so pushed us inside to find the things that were within us already, right? Because it's already there. And those pressures of loneliness and isolation and need, we needed things and we couldn't buy them. And the way you got them was by making them. So we would be sent off to play in the woods, and that was our big babysitter, or the workshop was for the restaurant where they had hammers and nails and wood, and we would just take all of these construction materials and build these fantasy ships that we thought we would sail away into the world on, and just in your imagination you're dreaming always and acting out of these dreams in your hands. And the restaurant was so embodying of making and making do. There was a woman, Helen, who would melt down all the candles, and after every night shift, Nepenthe was illuminated by candlelight only. And there were always these tapers at the end of the day, and she'd melt them down and dip candles with her family to create new candles for light, because they didn't have electricity. But Helen's family continued that tradition with her. 71 years later, that is still happening in our community, where her family dips candles every year for light, but now for gift giving and for the ritual and for the beauty of that. And that was the kind of person I grew up around, people who really did those kind of things. And the Christmas tree at Nepenthe initially was this the top of a redwood tree, something spindly, something that was found in the woods and brought home. And the restaurant was big and cavernous, and these high ceilings, and these spindly Christmas trees would be placed on the middle of the restaurant and needed to be filled. And it wasn't like there was a place you could go and get ornaments, right? So the ornaments were made from beating tin can lids. There were plenty of tin can lids because a lot of our recipes required number 10 cans. And that's what like a big restaurant version of a kidney bean would come in or something. And the kids would all beat the tin can lids to within an inch of their lives with ball-peened hammers, right? So can you imagine seeing these tin can lids that are shimmering in candlelight hanging from the sparse boughs of these redwood tree tops or whatever, from the center of this restaurant? You'd walk in and you'd see just shimmer and light reflecting and a lot of space, and I think actually they're very metaphorical for what was happening, because where there was light, there was a reflection, in our lives. There was like, there were these people who would come and they would dance, or they would do yoga, or they would write poetry. Kaffe being one of those people for me, because he'd come back, he'd come home. And I was younger. I'm his niece. So he was always away. And when he would come back, he would set up a slideshow and show us where he'd been. And it was just like this illumination of light that would just be like captivating for all of us. And then he would go away again, and he would just ignite this magic in us of possibility and the world beyond Big Sur. And those structures within Big Sur of, within our family of making do, making with your hands, the traditions of knitting. The guys, it was the guys, it wasn't the women. I'm sure the women were knitting also, but the story is the guys who were the chefs and the cook and the salad chef, the bartender, the waiter, they would come in the winter when it was slow and dump bags of yarn on the tables and just sit there and knit sweaters together. And they called them dump sweaters because they were just the dump of yarn, various and sundries. And those sweaters became, beautiful objects of warmth that came out of that boredom, that isolation, not a lot of business. And that was a way to pass the time, but also to create something really beautiful. So there is this kind of awareness in a childhood like that, where you see how people respond to these kinds of pressures. And that's a way to not only survive them, but to actually create something meaningful and to create something beautiful that is going to elevate your life and take you forward. All of those early experiences I feel were my bridge into adulthood and discovering the life I was meant to live.
Mm-hmm. And so what have you been working on during the pandemic?
Well, the pandemic is getting pretty old, Melanie. It's almost, what is it, 10 months into this? So initially, what I focused my energy on doing was teaching and just doing online. I started a group called Awaken the Artist Within to reach across through the internet to people who were feeling really depressed and sad and freaked out by all this, and starting to do projects with them to inspire them to get creative. And I actually stopped painting for a while and went into knitting, and I knitted up a whole bunch of stuff, and I have my knitting basket here just to show you some of the colors. As you can see, the colors I'm working with in my knitting are mirroring the colors I'm working with in my cards, and that's not surprising. There's always kind of this color energy that is kind of moving underneath all of these other things that you think you're consciously doing. I have been, like the rest of the nation, baking sourdough bread like crazy and perfecting my recipe. So those are some of the things. And I think it was Salvador Dali who said, we must live multidimensional, artists live in three-dimensional lives. So all of these things are happening, and I'm going out. Here's the thing that's new for me. The new COVID response has been going out on Monday mornings and painting with 4 other painters, and just going back to the same place and painting the same scene again and again and again. And those Mondays at the beach where we're looking at water and mountains and trees and just reapproaching and exploring. So this is kind of like my new Monday madness of painting. And I have literally 50 of these now, I think, because the time has been going by. But I love the repetition. I love the revisiting of an idea and just allowing myself to come back to it, kind of like Kaffe working with tumbling blocks pattern. It's like the same pattern, but he's changed the colors, he's changed the mood, the feeling has changed. So these things are, just little. They are my life. I shouldn't say little. They are the life I'm living during the pandemic that moves between teaching and painting, baking, and most recently I've started a new program called Drinking from a Cold Spring, which is about taking all of these kind of lateral and experimental art making methodologies that are not traditional painting, but really about creativity and breaking through and breaking back into that space in yourself that's always there. That is that river of joy that Rumi talks about. It's always within us. So finding ways to reconnect with it, and all of those things. I mean, it's like a freaking circus in my brain, but all of these things are keeping me sane. And what I've realized is that I need all of them. I'm not good if somebody says to me, spend 40 hours just working on your book, or spend the whole day on this one thing. I need to move around and have that multiplicity of creative outlets to keep me from stagnating or getting too analytical.
Yeah. So 2 things. One is, I can't find Kaffe in this gathering. I don't know if he got sort of knocked off and is having trouble getting on. So I'm sort of frantically texting people involved in the behind the scenes trying to find him. So I just not exactly sure how to handle that, but if the behind the scenes people can help.
So Kaffe is back online, but he's not, hasn't been made a co-host. So.
Okay, and I've been trying to find him. It's supposed to be Mac. Yes, and I've been, while you were talking, I was desperately looking for it.
Looking for him.
And
how are you?
Okay, if you can say something that would help us to find you, because I'm having a hard time. As the host, I think I'm the only person that can make him a co-host, but I can't find him on here. Allie, can you find him and spotlight him? Possibly. So While I'm doing this,
There he
Kate,
is. Yay! He's back.
we are so happy to see you.
Wow.
How long were you away?
Oh, forever.
No, you've been here 10 minutes.
Yeah. I've been sitting here waiting for you to tune me in, but
Okay, sorry, I was having
we had
trouble
He just
negotiating
had
it
to
all.
put up with me.
Yeah. So one thing I want to talk about right now is family legacy. And because Kaffe and Erin, you come from a family of artists with a lot of energy, a lot of really creative people. And I feel like sometimes other people will say like, oh, well, they're talented, or, oh, they were born into, that type of tradition. And it almost becomes an excuse for not nourishing your own creativity, because you sort of say, oh, I'm not talented, or, oh, that's not what we do in our family. I wish I had had a family like that. And one thing I want to say to people today is that if you don't come from a family tradition of creativity, of card making or knitting or painting or dancing or whatever it might be, that go for it. Begin that family legacy. Be the change you want to see in the world. And I feel like Kaffe and Erin, in the teaching that I've seen that you've done and in the conversations we've had, seems like that's what you're always trying to do. You're always trying to say to people, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there still seems around this word of art or artist or talent, they seem to have become stumbling blocks in our culture, to the point where we think we're not allowed to do it, or we shouldn't reveal what we make because we don't feel comfortable calling ourselves an artist. So Kaffe, I just wonder what you can say to us. I mean, hopefully a lot of people are working on their cards right now, but just about going for it in general.
Well, what I find is, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I find so interesting is, when we give our workshops, I remember a woman coming up to me in the early days saying, I'm just a housewife. I don't know about color. And I thought, well, darling, I don't know about color either. I don't know anything. I'm always kind of discovering and experimenting and playing. And, I've got some wonderful disasters put away if people want to see, what you go through to arrive at a harmonious, beautiful color scheme. You just have to keep playing. And what I find, what I try to do is to reach for something extreme. When I'm doing colorways of fabric, I'm trying to drum up moods that are quite different from each other. And that is a kind of stimulus. You can find different ways to stimulate yourself. One of the things that I find interesting about color is when people just think about flowers and flower arrangements. A lot of people make a beautiful flower arrangement in their house, but they don't think that they're an artist or anything to do with color. Well, that's a very artistic thing to do. I find also people that make displays in shops, and just lay out fruit and vegetables and things like that in an attractive way, or piles of fabric or yarn or whatever. You can just tell when somebody is having fun and expressing themselves through those colors and objects.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is to just allow yourself to have fun and to try things out. And one of the things is there's just no way that you can do it wrong. It's just you can do it better and better. And that's the thing, is to find what you really enjoy doing and just make it so that it communicates to other people. That's the key, I think, to being an artist. Is we all have dreams, we all see beautiful things in the world, but the artist has that leap of imagination that they look at their audience and they think, what's going to speak to you? What can I say about this that's going to make it vivid to you the way it's vivid to me? And that's the thing. You find that way. You just keep playing with it until it's undeniably beautiful to the person who views your artwork.
Mhm.
And we can all do it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think Cave taught me something very important when I was visiting him the first time when I was in my 20s. I was telling him about a project that I was really passionate about, working with kids and the artwork kids were making. And I just felt there was a book there that would be celebrating these incredible and spontaneous, colorful, brave paintings and poems that the kids were making during a very challenging time in Big Sur when the road had closed for 3 months and these kids were just stuck, you know. So we were doing art up the yin yang, and I said to Cave, what if no one cares, you know, when I take this project off into the world? And he just opened his eyes, like the biggest eyes. He'd been lying in the sun, basking in the sun on the beach, and he just opened his eyes and he said, don't ever think that. And it just shook me to my soul, because I realized that so much of what gets in my way is doubting myself and pulling back from the big idea. And Cave really taught me trust in that feeling you have when you are turned on by this project or this way of working or these colors. Go with that. Don't ask, but do you think it's okay? Or, you know, don't pull back from that confidence. And not all projects make it into the world. You know, a lot of things I thought would be amazing didn't ever happen, or they were amazing in a very different way than I hoped. Other things,
Very good.
you know.
That's very good what you just said. Don't apologize. I mean, one of the, I was in a workshop once, and I had one of my quilts hanging up the way I do here now, and I was looking at the quilt and I was pointing out the things that were really working in the quilt, and I said, but there's some things that are really not working in this quilt, like this little corner is not very good, and this is not very good. And then I said, oh, by the way, there was somebody that wanted to buy this quilt. Is she here? And the teacher in the class looked over at me and she said, not anymore. She doesn't want it now.
Right. That was the end of that. Uh-oh.
And
Well,
so never apologize. Never point out what you think is a weakness.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. It's like we're creative beings. It is not if you are creative. It is, are you acting on that creativity? So the whole idea of am I or am I not, that's not the question. You are. That is the absolute truth. That is the human gift. So how are you putting it on your calendar? I know Cave is incredibly organized. He's on the work of designing from breakfast until dinner, and he is 100% available for his projects. And I think people think somehow it's going to happen to you, like you're going to be inspired and you're going to go off and become the next whatever. But that's not the point. The point is listening to that feeling you have when you're organizing flowers or when you're working on something that gives you that joyful sense of connection and that sense of purpose, that sense of pleasure. We are made for that. That is the thing to pay attention to, whatever it is, you know, whether it's rolling up a ball of yarn or knitting, painting a painting, whatever. That idea of, you know, it's special for some people is just a complete crock of hooey. And each one of us has a better, happier life when we give ourselves even 10 minutes a day of doing something that is just about your creative life, whether it's writing, whether it's baking, you know, it all comes out of us in different ways.
Don't you think, Erin, that at the beginning, sometimes it's a bit painful. It's like exercising or jumping in cold water or something, you know, for people, you know, they're not used to that activity.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I go to the ponds here, and I used to, all through the winter, I would jump in the ice cold water, and it just felt absolutely fabulous afterwards. But you had to have the history behind you, and also the fear of not dying of a heart attack. But that thing, if when you make something, even a little doll or a little tiny
eyeglass case or some sweet little thing that is just a little precious thing that you have made, you've put those colors together, you will feel better about that afterwards. And that little object will go on talking to you through history. And that's what's wonderful. Why I tell people, keep a sketchbook, and whatever little stupid sketches you do, keep it in a hardbound book so that you can open it and go through it from time to time and realize, oh, this isn't so bad. This is a rather good little thing. You look at it later and it's become a real thing, as opposed to, oh, it's not quite right. I'm looking at this subject and I haven't got the lines right. Don't worry about that. Later, it will be fabulous.
Right. Don't KonMari your sketchbooks. I have my sketchbooks going back to when I was 6 years old, 8 years old, and sometimes it's crap and sometimes it's amazing, and pages change back and forth between competency and not competency, and it's so fascinating just seeing the development and evolution and of painting, drawing, and also writing, and lists of things that I was doing that day. It's like, oh wow, I didn't know I was interested in that then, but now I look back and see that I was, you know.
And I think that one thing I learned while I was writing my book, Making a Life, was that the sketching, the drawing, the doodling can also be sort of an avenue just into yourself, a way of grounding yourself and a way of getting in touch with your gut or your soul.
Absolutely. I agree.
And that it's not, some people say, oh, well, I don't like to draw, or I'm not good at it, or I don't doodle. But like having a sketchbook, it doesn't mean that you have to be preparing to be a painter. Just like, you know, you can knit or you quilt or sew, you can doodle as a way of taking yourself on a journey that goes beyond words, that uses, you know, another part of your brain.
Exactly.
I think that's why people really like doing those adult coloring books so much. It's like, it's obviously not about, you know, being the next Picasso, but it is incredibly satisfying to have this space within which to color, right? Just to play with color and to take all of these layers and layers of expectation off of the act and let it be simply that joyful connection with your hands, with your heart, and that feeling space. That feeling space is where you need to be guided, and not on top of it with constant, is it good enough? It's like, who cares? The more you do the thing you love, the better you get at it. You're going to have hits and misses along the way, but it's that pleasure that keeps pulling you in, and that surprise and that delight. And then there's a moment when you don't care what anybody thinks, because you know what you think, which is, this is great. I'm really loving this, you know? So I think that's a really powerful place to get to. And it's right there. I mean, really, you can find it on a dime.
It can be right there in the card that you're making at this very moment, just to be really present and not judgmental of it during the process. I mean, I am definitely someone who needs to let my projects, whether it's a doodle or a knitted hat or anything else, it has to sit sometimes for months or a year before I can actually see it and appreciate it. And I just, in the last year, started keeping a sketchbook, and I was just looking at it last night and looking at pages where when I was doing it, I thought, oh, I'm ripping this page out. I don't want any memory of this page. And then I looked at it last night and I thought, oh, that's actually kind of nice. I might build on that and do something else with it.
That's great.
Yeah. I wanted to just segue for a moment, because I want to also talk about intention and the intention that you put into your work, and the care, the love, the emotion that you put into it. And I know that there is a tradition in Big Sur that I believe began at Nepenthe, or began with Holly, your sister, Kaffe, about blankets for babies. Kaffe, can you tell us about that? And if you tell us about your participation in it?
My sister Holly came to art quite late in her life, and she just ate it alive. She painted and painted and painted, but she also was a fabulous knitter, and she was the most enthusiastic fan of my books on knitting, and she would take them and and play with the patterns, and then absolutely went off on her own, doing wonderful, wonderful knits. In fact, she became I forget what they call it, but a major knitter.
Master knitter.
A master knitter, exactly. And so, but she started this thing of getting everybody in the family involved, everybody that could possibly knit, or she would even teach them how, and they would knit a simple little square, just a square of one color was fine, so that everybody in the family would contribute to a little patchwork blanket for the new baby, because our family is very fertile. We have babies coming along every 5 minutes. And so there's always a chance to make another wonderful blanket that all the family gets involved with. It's the most lovely thing. And you crochet these different squares together. And that's a little memory for the child.
Mhm.
Yes, and that was Holly's task. I mean, she would take every one of those squares and crochet the border and then put them all together. And she's actually here right now. We could ask her more questions, but
Hello, Holly.
Hi, Kate. Happy birthday tomorrow.
Oh, how lovely. Oh, I'm going to fly home and eat that.
The burnt sugar cake.
How wonderful.
Yeah. So that was
another tradition in our family is that Holly makes birthday cakes for everybody's birthday, and it's always the one that they love the most.
I got a cake too.
Yay!
Hey, Holly.
Hi, Brandon.
Happy birthday, Kate.
It's also our anniversary. 30 years ago today, we met.
Wow.
Wow.
Make a wish, blow out the candle, and make a wish.
Christmas present.
Okay, if I made a cake for you too, I didn't make the candle. Yeah, so I have matches here. And this is the pumpkin spice cake from the Nepenthe, from the restaurant. And when
Recipe.
Yes, the recipe from your niece Nani's book.
Yeah.
And I don't know with all the technology, but I think Nani is here as well. Yeah. And I know about the pumpkin spice cake because when I was in Big Sur with you to celebrate the publication of your autobiography, we were eating lunch and I was deciding if I would have dessert. And you said, oh, you have to have it. You have to have the pumpkin spice cake. It's so good. And then I learned that it was in Nani's book. And so I learned to make it. And so I just want to wish you a happy birthday and thank you for introducing me to this cake and to your world and to just everything that you do. And I know we were trying to find, there she is. Can you unmute? Oh, shoot.
Mute.
She's muted.
I know, and I'm trying to find her to unmute her. But until I think Allie might be able to figure out how to do that. But I will tell everyone that after the event, I send out a newsletter that has a link to the recording. And it will also have a link to a PDF download of the recipe for this cake, which is in Nani's book, My Nepenthe. So that will be a nice surprise and maybe it can become part of your family tradition. I'm not sure if, I think what we should do now is we should switch to Caitlin, who's been collecting questions that people have. And Caitlin can ask Kaffe and Erin those questions. And then in the meantime, we're going to try to figure out, I'm going to try to unmute Nani so that she can say hi.
I'm unmuted, I think.
Oh, okay. So say hi.
Hi.
Oh, hi, Nani.
Hello to everyone, and it's an honor to be a part. And I just want to give my little 30 seconds with Kaffe. When I was younger in my 20s, also went to his house. And my Nepenthe is, it's about our family story and my creative process through food. But really, we've all been so inspired by the way we grew up and with Kaffe. But when I was in my 20s and I went there and got to be in his kitchen, which is still my favorite place in the world, and I got to be there last year for one night. But just going to the market with Kaffe and him pulling out these gorgeous cabbages and looking at all this beautiful food visuals that he had, but then his kitchen is just filled with color. And it was such an inspiration back then to cook in that space. And I remember dreaming, I think I used to say to Kate, when you want to make a book with food and color and cookbooks. And, ultimately Mine and Penthe came out of that, kind of those early ideas and sitting in his space, and a lot of inspiration from his books. So, I think, yes, Mine and Penthe's, we had we reissued it last year. So it has a new cover, vibrant blue, and it's Kaffe's fabrics and lots of visuals from our family story and our life, and lots of recipes, and 70 years of history, and it's at the bookstore.
Yeah.
And Caitlin has signed book plates. So if you do order today through Nepenthe, you will get a signed book plate for the book as well.
Thank you.
Wow.
It's so good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Caitlin, do you want to start the Q&A? We're going
Yeah.
to do this we're going to end at 2:15. Well, 2:15 in New York, the math if you're somewhere else. So there'll be about 19 minutes of Q&A, and then we're going to have a slideshow and
Sure.
say goodbye.
Can we have Holly say goodbye to Kaffe before
yes.
we start, because she has to go.
Okay, yes.
Okay, goodbye, Kaffe. I hope you have a wonderful birthday. Love you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Brandon, for the code word.
Yeah, good. All
Bye.
right.
Wow.
Okay, so first of all, I do want to say too, with the book plates, we have a limited number. So when we run out of book plates, we'll be out of book plates, but we're super happy that we can offer that. So huge thanks to you, Nani, for putting that together.
I have more. I'll send you more, Caitlin.
Okay, good.
You're all good, everybody.
And so I got a lot of really, really good questions. I'm going to kind of meld a few of them together that I feel are related to each other. So I have about 3 questions for you guys, which will probably take us through our 20 minutes. And the first one was really beautiful. A woman wrote in and said that her teenage daughter has decided to dedicate her life to art. She's going to be a ballet dancer. And she doesn't necessarily come from a family of artists, which is something we already talked about today, which I thought was great. But she wanted to know, what advice do you have for people who are choosing to devote their life to art? Is there like one kind of piece that you can offer up to help guide them on their journey?
Well, my advice would be just keep doing it, whatever it is that you want to do. Keep yourself fit in that activity, and keep coming back to it. That's the hardest thing, is sticking to it. We all get discouraged. I mean, I've had days where I thought I wasn't anywhere near being an artist. I was just pathetic. And somehow I kept going with a little encouragement from friends and things. So that's another thing, is get friends that encourage you to keep at it. Get rid of the friends that discourage you and say, oh, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Forget that. You want to work at whatever you're doing. Keep rehearsing and playing with that. And I love the idea of being a dancer. I wanted to be a dancer myself when I started.
Yeah, and I would say, just from my perspective, coming at it slightly differently as a mom and the mother of 2 kids who are both incredible artists and working in other jobs along the way before dedicating my life to painting. I was a writer. From childhood, from the first time I could write, I knew that was my identity, and I wrote plays and I wrote novels and I wrote poetry, and then it shifted into other things. And I was very resistant at first because I felt like, no, I have to be really, strict about just this thing. But now looking back, I'm 57. So I'm looking back on my whole life of art making and writing and creativity. And I think, gosh, I kind of did myself in a little bit, because I had this very brain-centered sense of self that did include being creative, but I didn't see the artistic, the visual as my path. I was very committed to writing, and what I wish that I could say to myself earlier on is be more open-minded. I knew that creativity was going to be my path in some way, but I became very attached to it being a certain way.
Yeah.
And although I don't regret a minute of the discipline of that, I spent 10 solid years writing 4 to 6 hours every minute a day, or every minute between other things, that discipline, that dedication, that carving out the time. I remember nursing my child, stirring a pot of boiling water and throwing in spaghetti, and having an envelope on the mantle where I was jotting down poems, right? I mean, doing it all at the same time, because when you're a mom, you have to, there's no other way. And that is absolutely true. That is what you do when you know this is what you're supposed to do. Now, it may not be that I ended up being a poet, although I've written poetry, but it's important to listen to that inner voice, to carve out discipline, and also to be playful with it, and adapt as you need to. adapt to what your inner voice is telling you. I mean, what if Dave had stuck with being one thing? He never would have become a textile artist, And what a gift he's given the world through his creation of these incredible fabrics and incredible ideas. I mean, he explored so many avenues on his way to becoming the artist he is today. So I would say that is all good stuff.
Next
That's
question.
wonderful.
People are wondering if they're going to have a chance to show their cards too.
Oh yeah, we definitely want
that.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask a couple more questions though, if we have time. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other question that was kind of asked, again, different people, different versions, that I liked is, they wanted to know more about, like, do you guys sketch out and plan your art really well ahead of time, or you just kind of jump in and get creating? And how do you, select those colors and select what you're doing? Is it more intuitive, or is it more structured, or is it a combination of both for you guys?
I would say for me, it's very intuitive, but I'll have a sort of rough idea. Like with this quilt behind me, this one, I was thinking, we're going to be in Italy. We're going to photograph in this beautiful village that's right on the sea, and there'll be that beautiful blue and green Mediterranean water. And so I made this quilt to echo that water. And that's the way I would start with an idea like that, and then the whole form of it just kind of follows. You play around with forms, and these diamonds seemed a good idea. So it is getting a rough idea and then jumping in. I worked with a filmmaker once who did a story of my life, and she came to my studio and she said, "I give the BBC a definite script. This is what I'm going to do. But on day one, I jump in and swim for my life." And that's my attitude. We just do what we can based on the roughest idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would reiterate that. I believe you need to follow the energy. So I'll often have an idea and I'll follow it and go with it, but then something will shift and I have to shift with it, because if I keep hitting the same idea on the head, it just dies. But if I can say, well, where is the energy? Where is the energy moving? That's why I moved from painting to knitting to needlepoint to other things, because moving around in all of these different creative ways. And then when I really don't have ideas at all, I just immerse myself. I mean, going back into nature, going for a walk is like going to the doctor for an artist, for anybody. But when you get out of your house and you're in the world and you're in sunlight and seeing the way the world is operating so magically, it's like there's art everywhere. The first time I took Kaffe for a walk when we were living in Burlington, Vermont, on a snowy day in winter, obviously. And we had walked this walk many times, and it was Kaffe and me and my little boy Chai, who was like 3 years old, or just this little kid. And Kaffe, I was looking down, making sure Chai didn't fall into a ditch. And Kaffe looked up and he said, "Oh my God, look at that pink." And I was like, God, singing with the angels. And I couldn't believe he saw something in all the snowy wasteland of that town that was singing to him. But it was this beautiful pink wall that I had never noticed. And that moment has stuck with me for my whole life of the beauty is there to find. And when you're stuck creatively, to go out into nature, go out into the world and receive what there is to be received.
I wanted to add something to that. One thing I've really been focusing on recently is how I feel at a particular moment. Like there's even now with the pandemic and so many things stopped, I feel like I've been incredibly busy. And so I'm often physically doing one thing while my brain is thinking about other things. So I might be walking the dog and thinking about my work. I might be sending an email and thinking about that email and then the next email I need to be sending. Or I might be in the shower and thinking about, something else I need to do in the house. And I feel like the times when I just stop and I just try to be present. So if I'm in the shower, I feel the water hitting me. If I'm walking the dog, I see the way the dog's paws are hitting the ground, or I see the nature around me. And that everything is more enjoyable when I'm present in the moment. And when I was baking this cake for Kaffe, I was like, okay, I have a lot of things to do, but I'm just going to be here. I'm just going to bake this cake. Like I'm just going to mix up the ingredients. I remember what Nani told me about adding extra spice, but I remember, how I tasted this cake for the first time, and I was able to block out everything else and just be present. And I think that what we do creatively when we're knitting or painting or writing is a way of becoming present. I think that's a gift that it gives. But we can also, and it seems like Kaffe, you're really tuned into this, we can also just be present, like when we're doing ordinary things.
Yeah. Melanie, I have a very good example of that. I used to paint these big still lifes of lots and lots of pots all arranged on my table in London. And one day I absolutely lost the plot. I looked at it and it just looked boring. And I thought, what am I doing? I can't go on with this painting, and it's so labor intensive, and I have to do so much to make it come alive. And I couldn't get past that moment. And I just stopped, put my brush down, and stood and stared at that still life until it came alive. And what happened was I entered the moment, and I was able to suddenly see it like it was a huge cityscape. All of these pots lined up on this table became like this monumental structure that was like a fabulous sculpture garden or something. And I thought, if I can just get that onto the canvas, the emotion I'm feeling from looking at that, I'm going to be there. And it was absolutely entering the moment. But as you say, you're painting and you're thinking of what you're going to shop for and who's coming to dinner, and all these things are going through your head. And if you can just stop and look at that still life, or look at what you're doing, look at stirring that lovely cake, and make it important, as if it's a beautiful modern dance you're doing by stirring that cake.
How would carry water, right? I mean, it's the Zen idea of being present for every moment. There are certain things that catapult you into presence, being terrified of something, you're making a cake you've never made before, and you're really paying attention to every detail because you're terrified you're going to blow it. That can really focus the mind and drop you in. And I think we're also more receptive creatively when we decide consciously, throughout the day, every day, I consciously remind myself of this quote from Teilhard de Chardin, who was a Catholic mystic. You probably have heard this quote before. It's so beautiful. We are all spiritual beings having a human experience. And whenever I'm in stress throughout the day, which might be in conversation with a difficult person, or having to make a difficult decision, or driving, or interactions of any kind, I just bring myself back to that. And in the beginning of my day, I think about that I am a spiritual being having a human experience. So all these human challenges that get thrown at me, my mother always says, it's a school. They're there to teach you. And so whatever's happening, I just kind of come back into myself as a spiritual being. How do I want to experience this moment and receive it, and not be undermined by it or overwhelmed by it? And it helps me a lot recently, that idea.
Yeah. So what's the best way? I think if people want to hold up their cards, if you go to view in the top right corner and you click on gallery, and you hold up your card, and then if you want to see other people's cards, you'll see about halfway down on the screen, there's like a little arrow that points to the right on my screen, and mine says 1 of 35 because there's 35 screens. So you can click through and you can see people's work.
Great.
Um,
Oh, lovely.
Oh, wonderful. I love it. Love it. Oh, these are great.
And-
Wonderful.
Looking at the cards.
Oh,
beautiful.
love that.
Oh my
Beautiful
gosh.
colors.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Beautiful. Oh, I love it.
So
Well, it looks like we're getting somebody spotlighting these. Ah, that's fantastic.
Gosh,
Wendy, Susan,
wonderful.
Caroline. Oh, I love that.
Vegetables.
I wish my mom were here to see Susan's. That would totally put her on.
Oh, beautiful.
Gorgeous colors.
Wow. Oh, beautiful.
Fun.
I think
I
you
love
better tell
the
someone.
texture.
Oh, that's so jazzy. Susan's great. That's fantastic. Matisse.
So,
Marine, great.
Wow.
Caitlin, is there one more
I'm
question
very-
that you want to ask to finish things up?
Yes, I think it's a great question to end on, although I'm so dazzled by all of the beautiful art I just saw.
Yeah.
One thing, that came up a lot in different ways was this question around fear. There's the fear of letting go some of your art or letting go some of your supplies to make room for the new. And there was fear about, being intimidated around getting started as a beginner. And there was fear around being okay with making mistakes. And I think a lot of people would love to be able to hear is just, how do you two as artists deal with those feelings of fear, and how do you work through them? How do you embrace them and make them part of the process?
Oh,
Well,
boy.
I think fear is everything. I mean, hi, Brandon.
Hello.
If you have somebody in your life who's like Brandon, it's a really good idea to have somebody in your life who's really keeps you feeling loved and valued, as I have with Tom. I mean, it's really nice to have another person who thinks you're pretty great. But fear is the constant, I would say. I mean, you're always working through fear. It doesn't go away. You don't stop being afraid. So you just begin to develop a muscle toward, starting really small. I mean, if you don't think you're an artist and you don't think you're that great, but you kind of want to do something, making like a little card, right? It's not intimidating. No one expects you to put your Christmas card on the wall of a museum or anything. And then you realize, oh, I took a lot of risks, because every art piece you make is a series of decisions you're making. And every decision, you could make a mistake and you can feel afraid. I mean, I just am I'm knitting something right now. And I'm like, oh, I should rip it out because I made these mistakes that the colors aren't that great. And I'm like, keep going, because then it becomes part of the process. And I can look back at it and say, oh, look, it got a little muted there. Now I jazzed it up. And those little decisions add up to a muscular approach to fear. You know it's there. You know you can survive it. You go through it. And on the other side is ecstasy, joy, and exhilaration. And you can't wait to do it again. And you will be afraid again. But you just get used to it. It's like, oh yeah, I know that feeling.
My feeling is that you should you should make things. And if you think it's awful and it hasn't come off, somebody out there is going to like it. You know, somebody's going to walk in and say, that's my favorite thing you've ever made, and I want to buy it. So remember that that's always possible.
Can I add something? Kate told me at the very beginning, you might not like what you've achieved, but guaranteed somebody else will.
Yeah.
Also,
exactly.
remember, mistakes leave room for opportunities.
Yeah.
Put that on your t-shirt.
That's great. I mean, also, this is also speaking to perfectionism. And this is, what is perfectionism? Perfectionism is your attachment to your ego, that you're someone who can't make a mistake. And you're afraid you're going to let your ego down by making a mistake. And then you don't even bother trying because you don't want your ego to feel like a failure. Well, get your ego out of the story, because the ego is just like wrecking things, you know? And it's like you're trying. What's the point? We're gathering together today to remind each other that at the essence of our humanness is creativity, and that when we access it, we find joy, even during a pandemic, even with the world going to hell in a handbasket, which is what it feels like. It's like, how can we be happy? We can, because it lives within us and it's our birthright to create. So to work through fear and to get to that juicy, happy, joyful, connecting place is the point. So Melanie may have been afraid to pull off this birthday party, holiday gathering in London, people all over the world. But she did it anyway because she knew that fundamentally it was a really, really beautiful gift to all of us, right? And if she had been like, I'm gonna make mistakes, I'm not gonna be perfect, I'm not gonna do it, we would have all lost, right? We would have all lost. So if you can come into contact with the depth of intention of this beautiful offering, yes, we're going to make mistakes along the way. So what?
Well,
perfection.
Picasso said every child is an artist. So remember, we were all artists at one point, and then we sort of got too grown up and everything else for it. But some of us stay being a child, like this one. You know, he's learned to knit, do needlepoint, draw everything just by sitting around the studio and playing with things and having a go. And with my encouragement, you know, he took off and made a career out of it.
And I think being around generous people is really important, because I started doing a lot of these things that I do that give me so much joy with a generous teacher. You know, my uncle, Kaffe, said, here's a needlepoint, go draw something and stitch, or here, let's get some knitting going, or okay, this is a still life, let's paint it. And if he had been criticizing every effort I made and saying, oh, that's not good enough, or you didn't tidy up your ends or whatever, he was just like, go for it, you'll enjoy it, have at it. And that freedom and encouragement, it's so important for young people to have that. It's so important for old people to have that, for all people to have that. You're around people who just want to tear you down all the time in the interest of making you better, you're around the wrong people.
Yeah.
Bottom line. So maybe you need to switch that out. But you know it, you feel it. It's like, get rid of all the other voices that shut you down and listen to that inner voice that says, you were born to do this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So do you want to add something else, Kaffe?
Well, no, I mean, what a lovely chance this was. And I'm sorry that I went blank in the middle of it. But I mean, I hope, you know, if there's knitters out there and they're making swatches of things, they can make the blankets that I'm making, you know, put them all together in a wonderful, and also, isn't fashion full of patchwork right now? So make yourself wonderful patchwork jackets and things like that. You know, you guys can be the creative people that'll be right in fashion now.
Yeah. Well, I think that I wanted to say about fear. Yes, I thought about canceling this event. I thought about never even starting this whole series because I was afraid. What I'm trying to learn when the fear creeps up is just to sort of say, yep, that's my fear. Like, I hear you, I see you, I feel you, but I'm still going forward. And so I think for all of us, going into this holiday season and going into this new year, which hopefully is going to be soon healthier for everyone, that, we just have to learn to just sort of greet our fear, and it'll always be there. And we need to sort of understand that we have a creative pilot light. Kate was referring to Picasso's statement about we're all born as artists. I really believe that we're all born with a creative pilot light, and society sometimes dims it for us a little bit for some reason. Hopefully it doesn't get completely squashed out, but that it's meant to be lit. And it doesn't, just being present for the process of whatever your creative expression is the natural way to be. The instinct to make the ordinary extraordinary is very, very natural, much more natural than spending your day scrolling on a phone or typing on a computer. So whether it's, you're lucky enough to be able to devote whole days to it, or an hour or 5 minutes, whatever it is, it has value. And it will be that time that you spend present and in the creative flow for however long it is nourishment that will serve you well throughout that moment, throughout your day, and throughout your life. So, here's to 2021 and to all sorts of goodness that can be born within ourselves, because the answer to all of this is not, certainly there is the health issues that are going on. There's a lot going on out in the world, but the answer in terms of our ability to cope and our ability to flourish is actually within ourselves. And in the introduction to my book, it has a title, it's Keep Looking at Your Hands. And I think I've gotten into the habit of ending these events by saying, keep looking at your hands. And just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz had the power all along to go home, I think within our own hands, we have the power, the magic to find our true selves and to find goodness and happiness. So that is my wish for everyone. I want to thank you all for being here. And obviously a big thank you to Kaffe and Erin and Brandon and Allie and Joan and Caitlin and Nani, all the people, and Holly, who helped to sort of pull off our surprise. Happy anniversary, Kaffe and Brandon. Happy birthday, Kaffe. Happy holidays to everyone. We're going to end with a slideshow that shows spreads from Nani's book, My Nepenthe. It shows spreads from Kaffe's newest book, Quilts of Burano. It shows pages from Color Duets, the book that Kaffe and Erin did together. And it has pages from Making a Life, the book that I wrote. If there are books on your holiday gift list, I hope that you'll consider purchasing them from the Phoenix Shop, because that is a family-owned independent store that has been sort of treasuring and nurturing creativity for more than 50 years. And those are the kind of places we want to continue to exist. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you, Melanie.
Are we allowed to ooh and ah?
Yes.
Go for it.
It's really hard not to ooh and ah when you're looking at these.
Ah. Oh, these are such beautiful books, all of them.